Welcome to DLS's teacher training module, Preparing Students for the DLPT. The purpose of this presentation is to learn about two tests that students may take if they work for the Department of Defense, or DoD. The DoD includes military personnel, of course, but also many civilians. If your students will be taking these tests, it will be helpful for you to understand them so that you can effectively prepare your students. Let's look at the objectives for this module. By the end of the module, you will know what the DLPT test is and how it is structured, understand the types of questions asked in the DLPT, and know about techniques and resources to help students prepare for the DLPT. Let's get going then. In Part 1, we will learn the answers to these questions. What is the DLPT? What does the test measure? And how do people take the DLPT? What is the DLPT? DLPT stands for Defense Language Proficiency Test. It has two parts, reading and listening. Or you could say that these are two tests, DLPT reading and DLPT listening. These tests are available for many languages, but only to people who work for the Department of Defense. You will not be able to take a test yourself, even if you wanted to. However, the DLPT is not a measure of aptitude. That is measured by the DLAB. It does not measure achievement or performance, which are both best measured in class, and it does not measure work-related skills, which is seen in the field. The DLPT is a test of global knowledge and is not only for DLI students. As the name says, the DLPT is a test of proficiency in reading and in listening. You might remember from other presentations that proficiency means a person's ability to do things, to do real-world tasks. For the DLPT, this will be tasks to perform after reading or listening to a text in a foreign language. The tasks are asking students to show an understanding of the text and how complete that understanding is. The tasks that the test asks students to try are designed to fit with the ILR skills for reading and listening. There are separate presentations that explain the ILR reading and listening skills, but we will do a quick review here. Here is a list of terms and concepts, and each one is associated with an ILR level from 0+ to 3. Pause the video for a few minutes and assign each item in the list an ILR level. Answers should be either 0+, 1, 2, or 3. Resume the video when you are ready to review your answers. Let's review the answers to each item. This course level is associated with level 3. Elementary proficiency is something you would see at level 1. Word level, when students only know memorized words or phrases, is level 0+. Memorized proficiency is another indicator of level 0+. Abstract or hypothetical topics are present for level 3 speakers. Speakers use paragraphs in level 2, and the sentence level is used in level 1. Connected narration is mastered at level 2. Level 3 is where general professional proficiency emerges. Presenting an argument is a task expected of level 3 speakers. Limited working proficiency is present in level 2. Now for some practical details. The DLPT is a test administered by computer. The student will need to go to a U.S. government facility on a scheduled day and time to take the test. DLS has no involvement in scheduling the test. The student will make the arrangements through his or her agency. The reading and listening tests are each 3 hours. There is a short break in the middle of each test, but many people prefer to take the reading and listening tests on separate days. As you can imagine, a 3-hour test is tiring, and 2 in one day can be very tiring. Now about the test itself. What is the DLPT like? All the text used in the test are authentic. They were written by native speakers of the language for native speakers. They may be very lightly adapted. This will usually mean shortening the text but not simplifying it. Always remember that text, as it is used here, means listening passages too, not just reading. Every test has text on a variety of topics. Because this is a test for people working in the Department of Defense, military and security topics will be included. But there will also be text on politics and society, even things you might call human interest stories. There are questions for each text, and the questions are always in English. Since this is a test of comprehension in reading or in listening, it makes sense to have the question in the student's native language. Figuring out the questions is not supposed to be part of the test. In the reading test, there are 60 questions based on 36 texts. There can be up to 4 questions about one text. In the listening tests, there are 60 questions, but based on 40 texts. There can be 1 or 2 questions about each of the listening texts. The text and the questions start at the lower levels and move towards higher levels. In the listening test, lower level audio can be heard only once, but for higher levels it is possible to listen twice. The computer will never allow the test taker to hear a listening text more than 2 times. The questions for each text are visible before, during, and after the listening or reading. This is important since the student can know in advance what to read or listen for in the text. There is no penalty for wrong answers, so it is a good idea for the student to try and guess. Finally, the questions may be multiple choice or constructed response. The type of question depends only on the language being tested. For the more commonly tested languages, multiple choice questions have been developed. But for the languages where not many people are testing, constructed response questions are used. They are easier to develop. Now let's look at the 2 types of questions. How is the DLPT-5 different from the DLPT-4? All DLPT-4s are multiple choice, while the DLPT-5 has some multiple choice and some constructed response. DLPT-4 focuses on levels 1 plus and 2, while DLPT-5 is focused on levels 2, 2 plus, and 3, so it has less items below level 2. This reflects the post 9/11 shift in focus from basic linguistic training to an emphasis on operational readiness. However, they are both computer-based tests. Now we will look at some sample problems from a DLPT test. In a DLPT test, the text will appear in the target language, but the questions will appear in English. This is a level 2 text. It reports a concrete factual event. Notice that the questions are also at level 2. They do not ask for specific information that can be found in the text, such as the location of the accident. Instead, the answers depend on understanding the overall meaning of the text. Now, what about constructed response questions? Here is a sample of constructed response reading. Students write answers to the questions or type them in, since the DLPT is a computerized test. Students can read the questions, then the text, before coming up with their own answers. In a constructed response test, there are many correct ways of answering. For example, to answer question 1, what were the 3 people accused of and what did they claim had happened? A correct response could be human trafficking or smuggling aliens. They could also probably say smuggling people or even smuggling foreigners. These could all be considered correct. For question 2, what are the customs officials investigating? We could say something like whether the 15 illegal aliens paid to be taken to Sweden. And similarly to multiple choice reading questions, the questions will be in English and the student will provide answers in English. Only the reading text will be in the target language. Now it is your turn to try writing your own constructed response questions. Remember, constructed response questions do not provide multiple choice answers. Instead, the students will respond by writing their own answers. You will be shown a level 2 English article that you should base your questions on. Be sure to aim your questions at the general meaning of the article rather than asking about individual facts. Here's the article you will base your questions around. Read through the article, then write down the questions you come up with. Remember, ask general questions on what the article is about. If you find the article difficult to read in this formatting, you can find a Word document of the article on the same page as this presentation. Pause the video while you read the article and come up with at least 2 questions. Resume the video when you are ready to continue. There are many questions you might have come up with for this article. Here are some possible questions with their answers. Why have some DC residents had problems going through airport security? Some security agents do not recognize District of Columbia as a place in the United States because they do not know what the DC in Washington, D.C. means. When did these problems begin? In 2013, when the design of ID cards was changed. What are 2 things being done to address the problem? Number 1, security officers are being reminded that the District of Columbia means the same thing as Washington, D.C. 2, earlier this year, Washington officials decided to go back to using Washington, D.C. on ID cards. Now let's think about how to prepare students for the DLPT. Everybody would like to have practice tests or at least a sample test. Unfortunately, these are not available for the DLPT. For Arabic and Farsi, a private company has books that are supposed to help prepare students for the DLPT in both reading and listening. The books are quite useful, but only for students at level 2 or 3. If your student is hoping to score a 1, these books are not going to help. And for other languages, there are no such books to be had. For most languages, Gloss is a valuable resource. It is free and accessible to everyone. Since the gloss activities are set up for students working on their own, they are better for homework than classwork. You should always preview a lesson before assigning it to your student. After the student has done the lesson, you can go through it in class and focus on whatever the student found difficult. For that day's class, you should have another text, or more than one, on the same topic for work in class. This will help the student focus on one topic and one set of vocabulary. For most of the test preparation work you do, you will have to use your own materials. We are lucky. We have the internet, and this is not nearly as hard as it used to be, and it will let you select things specifically for your student. Here are our tips. Use authentic materials rather than materials from textbooks that are created specifically for language learners. You can write your own constructed response questions, or if you're ambitious, you can write multiple choice questions. It is better to assign these for homework. Always remember to make the questions appropriate to the student's level, not too easy or not too hard. If you are working on a reading text, time the student and then stop the reading. This means the students will not have time to puzzle over every word. Encourage the student to read quickly to the end and try to guess the meanings of words from the context. If you are working on a listening text, don't pause the recording. Also, don't play the audio more than twice before having the student complete the tasks. Remember, these are test preparation activities. Most of what you do in class should not be test preparation, except maybe in the week before an exam. You and your students should spend most of the time developing general language proficiency. But test preparation is important too, and will help your student be happier and more successful. Thank you for watching this presentation on preparing for the DLPT. If you have any questions, please consult your language training supervisor.